Thank you for joining us for this installment of the Kagan Implementation Network webinar series. Today we're joined by Dr. Mike Winters, someone who gets results. Now a superintendent, but formerly, Dr. Winters was a principal at 2 schools where he successfully implemented Kagan Cooperative Learning. Dr. Winters led transformation, moving each school from underperforming to earning an A rating. As you listen and watch today, we invite you to focus on how Dr. Winters led this work, the concrete actions he took, the choices he made, and the ways he engaged in the process. This was no spectator sport. It was a hands-on leadership journey. Our invitation to you today is to identify the leadership moves so you can replicate these at your own site and drive similar success. We are extremely excited to share with you the story of Dr. Mike Winters, currently the superintendent of Saddle Mountain Unified School District. Dr. Winters has a great story. It's very rich. We will cover as much as we can today in sharing his story. There will be a Q&A portion that's going to be based off of the chat. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And then we have a few housekeeping items to take care of in our closing. Our protocol for the webinar today is to have Dr. Winters share his story for about 10 minutes. As Dr. Winters is sharing, we invite you to drop your questions into the chat. That'll be our parking lot for the webinar today. At the end of the 10 minutes, we're going to revisit those questions. And an invitation for you in these questions that you drop into the chat, think about the things that resonate with you. What strikes your curiosity? What are the things that are shared that make you want to go back and use at your school or district? And what do you need to know about those items to help you do that better? Dr. Mike Winters has been in education for 27 years. That's amazing. And he's served in multiple capacities. He has a proven track record of success transforming schools and school systems using Kagan Cooperative Learning. There are 2 schools in particular that are notable to share about where Dr. Winters came in and had those schools move from a D to an A rating and earned the Rodell Exemplary Principal Award. As a school principal, district administrator, and now superintendent, Dr. Winters has implemented Kagan structures in high needs areas with great success. He's also written some articles for the Kagan Online magazine. In one article, Earning A Grades with Kagan, Dr. Winters describes how a sustained focus on Kagan led to both academic and behavioral turnaround at 2 high needs schools. In a second article, Student Perceptions of Kagan Cooperative Learning, Dr. Winters explores student voices, revealing how learners experienced increased engagement, accountability, and positive school culture. Dr. Winters has been married for over 24 years and loves to spend time with his family. I hope we get to cover as much of this great information today. And as we share these items, please keep your questions in that chat. We'll get to visit as many of those as possible. All right, with no further ado, I'm going to stop sharing screen. We're going to bring Dr. Winters onto the screen with us and take us away on this journey, Dr. Winters. If it's helpful, tell us all about your story with Kagan, what first connected you and led this journey for you.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate being here. And I see some familiar faces in the group there. Yeah, so I started out as a high school biology and chemistry teacher. My first year was a nightmare. I was not a good teacher. And over the first 3 years of my career, by year 3, I thought I had figured out. My wife's also a teacher and also a teacher who uses Kagan Cooperative Learning, and so you should see our continuous round robins at dinner. But that's what happens in my house. We moved school districts, and at that school district, I was introduced to Kagan Cooperative Learning, and my mind was blown and realized I did not have teaching figured out. And so immediately began implementing structures in my classroom. I became an assistant principal. And while I became an assistant principal, I had the opportunity to become a Kagan Cooperative Learning School trainer. And that was probably the pivotal moment in my career. When I became principal, it became an expectation at my school that teachers would implement a minimum of one cooperative learning structure per lesson. And that was what we did. Over time, just naturally, that expectation never changed from one minimum. Teachers became more proficient. That turned into three. Even a lot of teachers even got to five structures a lesson because of how proficient they became. Went to another school, did the same thing. You're going to implement one structure per lesson and had great results at both schools. Then the last 14 years, I've been a district administrator, in the last now 4 years as superintendent, where I've led cooperative learning and implementation from the district level, trying to scale that implementation from 30 teachers to hundreds of teachers.
That's an amazing story. I'm really curious about your own personal roadmap for implementation. What are the things that you think are critical in this roadmap? And if it's helpful, maybe we start with the school level
Sure,
and also hear your thoughts on what the system level would look like.
sure. Definitely, I created a roadmap for this. I think it's a good way to put it. I mentioned earlier that the expectation was a minimum of one structure per lesson. So that was if I'm a fourth grade teacher that teaches all subjects, that's every math, reading, science, social studies, um, what am I forgetting? Science, writing, every lesson had a minimum of one structure. But when that became three, five, you can see how many structures kids on top of the team building and class building they were doing. Um, so for me, the key things for me as a leader was I as the building principal led the implementation. I was the instructional leader. I did not delegate this to an instructional coach or to a fourth grade teacher. This was my leadership. And that the two there's an aspect of accountability to this. Um, I saw Vern on the call. I'm going to steal his phrase. Is gentle pressure relentlessly applied was the accountability model. I didn't know it was that at the time, but it wasn't like a you will do thing. It more became because of the two things that I thought were the most powerful from a leadership perspective were I modeled and still do model structures every single time I'm in front of a group of people. Every meeting I've ever conducted as a school or building or a district leader has started off with a class or a team builder, and that continues to this day. And then I taught structures, let's say a structure of the month, but also when we're in a professional development, I modeled the use of structures in every single content area we ever covered, whether that was the staff handbook, state testing procedures, uh, whatever other initiative we were implementing, structures were used to instruct. So not only did it model the use of structures, it modeled that kind of content-free aspect of I can apply structures to any content. Doesn't matter if I'm a math, reading, science, 12th grade calculus teacher or a kindergarten reading teacher, I can implement structures. And the second most powerful tool for me was being in classrooms. Um, I was in classrooms all the time. Part of that was just being there. So just being there as the principal or leader, people were more inclined to implement structures. I actually got to the point where I had to call an emergency staff meeting and tell people, stop dropping and doing structures every time I walk into a room. I can tell it's not planned. That's not what I'm asking you to do. Part of that was my teachers did turn in lesson plans. And they were due at 3 o'clock Thursday afternoon. Every Friday morning, the first thing I did, or after announcements and kind of walking through the school quickly, was I went and looked at the lesson plans, and if they did not have a structure in that lesson plan, it got sent back to them. And that very rarely happened, but that was a kind of one of the accountability measures I had to put in place to make sure that was expectation was happening. But then I had to be in the classrooms to make sure it was happening. And two key points of feedback there was not only was I in the classroom, I gave feedback. One was, hey, I walk into your room and it's in the middle of a time pair share. And I gave feedback on, hey, this is what you did really great in time pair share. But you know, when you asked the kids to have think time, you forgot to tell them they were going to have 45 seconds to share. So their think time was correlated to the amount of time they needed to discuss. So it helped them do structures better. But also, what I found that teachers struggled with the most was they wanted to implement structures, but they just didn't understand when. So if I was in the room, I could say, "Hey, you asked this open-ended question about um, what do you, how did the story make you feel?" And you called on some raised hands. That's a perfect question to use time pair share. You asked the students to list as many countries they could list, and you just called on random students, and that's a great time to use Rally Robin. You gave a worksheet on correcting sentences. There's a great time you could have used Rally Coach or Sage Inscribe. So not only was it giving feedback on the structures themselves, but it was also on, hey, this is when you could have used a structure, and this is the structure or structures you could have used. And that over time, that's not an overnight implementation. It's a time, it takes time, maybe a year, year and a half. But the light bulbs start going off on people's heads, and then they start getting that capacity on their own. So that combined with the modeling of structures constantly, implementation just got accelerated.
Thank you, Mike. What I heard you say was one thing that's important to do in implementation in this roadmap is, as a leader, be using the structures in front of adults. And I heard you say in faculty meetings for even routine items that otherwise would just be you talking at them, you incorporate structures. That sounds really powerful. A second thing I heard you say was being in classrooms, inspecting what you expect, and it helps you tighten up the structures themselves, the steps, and also helps you support teachers in knowing when to use the structures. I think that sounds like really effective leadership.
Yeah. And two things I'd like to add onto that is it not only it was me giving the feedback, but I realized at certain points that, okay, this is getting too big. I can't do it on my own. So I needed a team. And what I would do is I had my teachers that were just really outstanding at structural implementation. And I took all those teachers to become trained in Kagan coaching. And we developed kind of a scope and sequence of 10 to 12 structures that we were going to get really good at our school. And every teacher was assigned 4 or 5 teachers that they were going to coach. And so the first one, let's say, was time pair share. The coach would go in and coach them on time pair share, and they had to like sign off on, hey, this teacher has got it, or I gave you this tip, this coaching feedback, then I'm going to come back and the next week you're going to do it again. So they'd have to, so some teachers would be on structure 9 while others would be like on structure 2 because it took them forever. So it ended up becoming where it was not just me. I had several people helping me with this feedback, and that really scaled implementation as well. And I had 2 points and I forgot what the other one was. But it was related to the modeling. If I think of it, I'll come back to it.
There's no way we could talk about everything you've done in one 30-minute webinar, and we might have to see if you'd be gracious enough to coming back a second time to tackle a different topic. I feel us gravitating towards implementation and the role of leadership in implementation. I'm curious to know what resistance, if any, you've faced at these multiple sites, and how you would advise leaders who might be watching this webinar who are going to face resistance. How do you advise that they address teacher concerns or pushback from their teams?
Sure. And that'll happen. There will be, you'll have people that are just going to go, wow, this makes sense. They're going to go back. Then you're going to have that group of people that no matter what you do, they don't want to do it. Then you're going to have kind of the 70% in the middle or so that you're going to have to really work on. There's different approaches. I would talked about gentle pressure relentlessly applied. It was very evident that this was not a flavor of the month. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to keep doing it. So either get on board or go somewhere else, kind of a thing. It was part of my interview process. Actually, it was, will you do this? And no one ever said no. Um, so I kind of made that very clear when they were hired that this is something you are going to do. Um, because of the modeling, because of the constant feedback, there was that gentle pressure. So I didn't face a lot of outward um, pushback. And there were a few people who would say, like, well, I don't do this. And I would say, you do now, kind of a thing where I'd have to be very direct. But it was more the support system that I put in place. It was removing obstacles, it was removing barriers. Okay, I can't do it because of this reason. Okay, well, I'm going to take away that barrier. I can't do it because I don't have whiteboards. Bam, there's whiteboards tomorrow. Or I ran out of markers. There's my so any if whatever excuse somebody had to resist implementation, I removed that excuse. Um, Currently I'm kind of trying to crack the nut of high school implementation. I'm getting a lot of pushback at the high school level, and I'd be open to any ideas anybody has on that because it's that's my biggest challenge right now. Um, I think too is once people saw results, we have our first year teacher induction happening right now. And just by coincidence, one of our instructional coaches was a teacher of mine at one of the schools I was at. And she shared a story about how I said, you're a good teacher, but look at your data. And because she was a resistor, do you want to take your data from this to this? And she did, and she started implementing structures, and of course her data took off. And so there's kind of a positive feedback loop. Once somebody gets a taste of that success, oh, I had 20% proficiency, but now it's up to 40. Whoa, what did I do different? I implemented structures. Now I can get to 50 and 60. So that kind of they get reaffirmed once they start doing it. So um, I would say stick to it. If you do get resistance, don't waver. This is going to work. I actually had a governing board retreat yesterday, and one of my board members talked about, well, when we pair people up, we're holding back the high kids. And I said, no, I'm going to stop you right there. That's a very common misconception. But the most powerful learning tool we have as human beings is teaching others. So that's one of the things I've heard from parents over the years is, well, my kid shouldn't be responsible for the learning of others, but here's the benefit your child is getting because they are now teaching others in a cooperative learning setting. And once I've explained that to people, I've never had anybody resist after that from an adult perspective in terms of a parent. Um, but really, resistors, you just got to stick to it, and they're going to get the point. Like either I'm going to do this, or I'm going to have to go somewhere else because this is what we're going to do. It's just being unwavering in your implementation.
There's something you're sharing, Dr. Winters, that uh, I'm interpreting, and I want to just check for accuracy. I really appreciate the stories of you engaging those who are resistors. You're surrounding them with support. And what it sounds like to me is that you're doing a lot of listening as well. You mentioned removing barriers, but to remove those barriers, you had to let them talk to you and share what their concerns were so that you could be there as a leader to support them. So just how accurate is that? That
Yeah,
listening is a key point in moving resistors to supporters.
yeah, that's very accurate. A lot of times I think people think when they hear the word accountability, they think you got to be mean and you got to be direct and you got to yell at people. That's not what it is. It's a conversation like we're having. I talk to everybody. Hey, hey, Aaron, yeah, I see you're really struggling with implementing structures. Why? What's going on? Well, I think it takes too much time. Okay, well, let me show you how we can address that concern. In the same amount of time you called on three people, I can get you to engage every single student in your classroom. Really? How am I going to do that? So it's learning, and each person, I joke, and it's kind of a joke serious thing, is that every one of my teachers has an individualized education plan. I worked with every teacher differently because I had those teachers that you taught rally coach, the next day they were doing it and doing it well. Then I had those resistors, and so it was really a lot of listening, and tailoring my leadership to those individual people, because what Lindsay needed to implement might be different than what Christy needed to implement. Um, and so there is a lot of listening and not getting defensive and just, um, well, here's how I can help you with that. So again, it's removing barriers. It's removing what I would perceive as excuses to why I can't do this. And then at the end of the day, it's like you have no more excuses. But it was I looked at people would consider it accountability. I truly looked at it as a support. I'm supporting you in this implementation. So you're not going at this alone. I'm just not teaching it to you and saying do it and you're off on your own. I supported them every single step of the way.
Thank you, Dr. Winters. I'm looking at the time and I would like to switch, if it's okay with you, to the Q&A portion. And so I'm going to invite Christy to share with us some of the questions that have hit the chat. And we'll go for maybe about 6 or 7 minutes through the chat.
Thank you, Dr. Winters. One question, and you may have addressed this in a way, when you were giving feedback, did you use the coaching worksheets?
It depended. The answer is yes, but it wasn't always that. If I was in a classroom, so let me step back. When I had that implementation team where I had 5 or 6 Kagan coaches, those people absolutely did that. Myself, it depended. Because when you're the principal, it's hard to remove that evaluation piece and people to not to look at you that way. So that took some time to kind of massage that. But if I was in a classroom, I had a walkthrough form that I would fill out and type up feedback and send it right away. Or I would do the coaching model and then give the form. So it just kind of depended from my perspective, but my Kagan coaching team absolutely did that.
Thank you. Is there any additional information you can share about the gains of students' social skills or perhaps their social orientation of the WITH orientation?
Sure. I think the best illustration of that is the first school I was a principal at. Over 90% free and reduced lunch. When I got there, and I'm not saying this to be dramatic, this is accurate. It was a war zone. I had, I don't know, 10 to 15 fights a day in classrooms. It was a K-8 school of 1,200 kids. And that was kindergarten through 8th grade. It was not just like an 8th graders fighting. It was the little guys were kind of the harder ones to deal with. It was just a really toxic environment. And by implementing structures, not just structures, we did class building at least once a week. We did team building at least twice a week. Kids sat in teams. When I talk about structures, I'm talking about the whole 7 keys here, not just doing structures. There was a whole system involved. And a lot of those people that resisted was, oh, cooperative learning doesn't work. Well, do you have your kids in teams? Are you doing class building once a week? Are you doing team building once a week, twice a week? No. Okay, well, that's why it's not working. It's not because it doesn't work, it's because you haven't done all these other things. That school had a huge turnaround in terms of behavior, where I would get at least 30 referrals a day to when I left there. If we had 10 referrals in a week, it was a bad week. It was transformative. And it was just the neighborhood was just conflict all the time. But for 7, 8 hours a day, the kids came to school and were taught social skills. We actually taught, so we had a social skill of the week. So every time we did a structure, we would, the teachers had charts, looks like and sounds like. How does taking turns look like and sound like in Rally Robin? And that was kind of a big deal we did. We had to, so because our kids came to us without social skills. Their social skills were yelling at each other and fighting each other. So we had to teach them replacement social skills. In one of the articles I wrote, there's charts, and I can remember we implemented, kids got an office referral for discipline reasons. We implemented what we called a positive referrals for trying to catch kids doing things positively. The first couple years, maybe 50 of those. The next couple years after that, it became 300, 400, where our positive referrals actually far outweighed our discipline referrals. And that really happened at my second school, where my first year there were several hundred referrals and a few positive referrals. By the time I left there, we had 49 discipline referrals my last year and several hundred positive referrals. Again, because of the connectedness of the students in the class, because of team building, class building, and using structures all day long.
That is very powerful. Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Some of the coaching you did when you visited classrooms, you mentioned you would just watch teachers teach a lesson and then suggest, better structures. We refer to as everyone answers structures now that you can use every day. And then with a Kagan coaching team, it was a different model of one structure, one coaching. How do you feel about, or do you use both approaches? And did you see the value in both?
Yes, absolutely. Because there is a little bit of, as the leader, there is a little bit of that accountability in there when the leader's giving the feedback, than more so when it's the peer. But from a peer, you also want your peers to think of you. It's almost some healthy peer pressure because you want your peers to think you're good at your job too, right? So I think both are valuable, and for me, I think that you got to have both. The more feedback you provide, um, I think the better and quicker implementation is going to go. Um, so yeah, I think using a combination of any and all feedback methods is appropriate. And that takes time too, because people got to get used to having people in their room giving feedback. And my as a principal, just on daily walkthroughs, it was just I wasn't like, hey, I'm going to be there at 10 o'clock. You're doing a structure. I was walking through.
Right.
If I was walking through classrooms, if I didn't see 3 or 4 structures, I felt like there was a problem going on in my school that day. So it was just I would happen to catch it at that part of the lesson. It wasn't scheduled. The coaching team, they pre-scheduled. They used their prep periods every week to schedule, hey, I'm going to be in your room at 9:30 and you're going to be doing quiz trade with your students. And that's when I would coach you. So it kind of depended on just kind of the natural flow of a school day.
Excellent.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you, Dr. Winters. I'm going to go back to the slide deck in just a moment, but just want to say deep gratitude for sharing with us your story. And there's many more questions in the chat. And what I'll say right now to those folks, we've asked Dr. Winters if he would be okay hanging around after the recording ends and just fielding a few more of those questions. And we're going to call that a victory lap. And if you'd like to hang around for the victory lap, in just a few moments, we'll close out the webinar and hang out with Dr. Winters for a few more moments. So going back to the slides, there's a few takeaways that really stick out to me. Dr. Winters' story shares multiple implementation efforts, 2 different schools, 2 different school districts. And there's a proven track record of success when implementation of Kagan is focused with fidelity and dedicated for multiple years, the outcomes will be there. A second takeaway is that the workshops are just a piece of the puzzle, a critical piece of the puzzle. Leadership is another critical piece. And Dr. Winters shared today the work that he has done, making sure that he models what he expects. So using those structures with adults, but also being present in classrooms, seeing what teachers are doing, when are they using the structures, and surrounding them with support to oversee implementation. Lots of really powerful elements of implementation in today's story. Dr. Winters has been kind enough and gracious enough to share his email address for anyone who would like to connect with him offline and hear more about his story, see what resources he might be able to offer. There's also multiple articles that Dr. Winters has written to capture these stories of success, and I'll make sure that those are linked in the next email to the Kagan Implementation Network so you can see where they're at on the Kagan Online Magazine. Today's webinar shared a lot of powerful implementation approaches. And if you have a leader in your network that could benefit from hearing these powerful stories, we invite you to scan this QR code, and then you'll just copy and paste the link. You can send it in a text message to them or in an email. This community is growing rapidly, and we would love for as many people across the country and the world to join us in this effort of making Kagan Cooperative Learning a part of every student's experience. If Dr. Winters has shared something today that makes you think you need to connect with us and get coaching booked, you need to get some engagement support booked, or one of our cooperative learning workshops, this QR code will lead you to a page where you just complete a short form with some information, and someone from our partnership team will be in contact with you to meet your needs. We appreciate everyone taking 30 minutes out of their valuable summer time to be with us today and be a part of this community. We hope to see you again soon.